So let's go to the source. REA Group Executive Manager of Economics, Angus Moore. Angus, it will be very welcome news to many people trying to get into the property market, but as Brent just mentioned, these house price drops aren't big.
Good morning, Tim. Thanks for having me. No, that's exactly right. We have seen a small decline in January. Of course, January tends to be a quieter month and there's not a lot of sales happening. So, wouldn't necessarily read too much into that in terms of where we're going to end up in 2025. But if we're looking over the back half of 2024, prices were a bit soft there. And in fact, in our major capitals, prices have been pretty stable for about the past 6 months or so. So that's going to be welcome news for, aspiring home buyers who are at least not seeing prices accelerate away from them. But of course, that is an environment in which, housing affordability is at very, very challenging levels, among the worst we've seen on our records because of how high interest rates are. And so the good news there is that we are now expecting we'll see rate cuts pretty soon.
Do you think it'll come in February, a rate cut?
Market pricing certainly has a very high probability on there being a rate cut in February. The inflation data that we got recently, really pointed to opening the door for that rate cut. It was a lot softer and, suggests that we're kind of through the worst of that. I'm probably not quite as confident that we'll see one in February. I think it's probably still more likely than not, but maybe not quite as confident as market pricing suggests.
And that's the thing. If we do see a rate cut, that'll give potential buyers a lot more confidence, and any prices that we've seen go down will soon turn the other way.
That's right. Even if we don't see a rate cut in February, we're definitely going to see some early in the year and probably a few this year. That's going to help affordability a lot, particularly for first home buyers who tend to be quite constrained in how much they can borrow and therefore what they can pay. And so, the fact that we're going to see some rate cuts this year is going to be a big boon for potential home buyers. And that will help start to put a bit of a floor under prices and support home prices. We're expecting we will see growth in home prices this year. We're expecting it won't be particularly strong given the challenging housing affordability, but the fact that we're going to see some rate cuts will probably start to push prices up.
What about the REA Group rental report? It's been a challenging space.
It's been a very hard few years for renters. There was some good news on this front, though, maybe good relative to where we have been. So we had our rental report out this week. What it showed was that nationally, median advertised rents were up 6.9% over 2024. That's still incredibly strong growth in rents. That's faster than inflation. It's much faster than what was typical pre-pandemic. So that's not necessarily good news, but the silver lining is it is the slowest pace of growth we've seen in some time, and much slower than what we saw in 2023. And that's really been driven by an improvement in availability. We are just starting to see a few more rental properties available. It's still lower than what's been typical over the past decade, but it is up, particularly in capital cities, over 2024 relative to what we were seeing in 2023.
Let's drill down on that as we wrap it up and look at the areas that it's most difficult to rent in. Where is it hardest to find a rental property?
It's unfortunately regional areas. Regional areas were particularly challenging early in the pandemic when we saw a lot of people moving out of, particularly our big capital cities, Sydney and Melbourne. That started to ease a bit in 2023. It looked like we were starting to see the heat come out of regional rental markets. But unfortunately, that's actually changed over 2024. Availability has declined again, down about 4% across 2024 in terms of the number of rental properties that are available to move into. And that means we've actually seen rent growth increase in 2024 relative to where it was a year ago. Rents regionally were up 10%, which is faster than what we've been seeing in capital cities. So unfortunately for regional renters, just continues to be really challenging conditions.
Angus, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the program.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tim.